darkness. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel again. Thank y'all so much for coming over, man. Rest in peace to brother Charlie Murphy. Those Dave Chappelle skits, when he was telling those stories, man, the Rick James, the Prince, oh my goodness, man. Got this video here from the Trap Post channel. It says, the day everybody found out how dangerous Charlie Murphy really was. You know, people will call him, they're like, man, this is like Eddie Murphy's evil twin. But we're going to see what they're talking about in this video, man. I was looking at a clip from Dave Chappelle's show the other day, man. That dude, just the way he would talk, like, yeah, me and Prince, we used to, all right, we ain't gonna waste no more time. Let's jump right into it.
Were you in trouble with the law?
Quite a bit, yes.
Were you ever in prison, though?
Nassau County Jail was as far as it went for me.
Right.
But everything that he said, it was the truth. You know, man, you didn't feel it like, oh, this dude is lying. Everything he said, it was the truth. And one of the most genuine people you want to meet, man.
Hey, he knew how to fight for sure.
And he never.
He knew martial arts, man.
He knew he was big into it.
Charlie Murphy could make you laugh until your
Martial
ribs
arts.
hurt, but behind that smile was a history few dared to speak on.
Did you like to fight?
I learned to like it. You know, when it's something that's gonna happen, it's inevitable. You know, it's part of the environment. It's either one way or the other to take it. Either you're gonna ball up into a fetal position or shrimp or whatever.
He wasn't just Eddie Murphy's brother or a storyteller. He was a survivor of New York's roughest streets, a gang soldier in the King Pythons, forged by poverty, tragedy, and violence. I
got rid of my gun because I was gonna solve a problem that was very simple, okay, with a gun, because I got emotional, I got angry, and at first, oh, you gonna do to talk to me like that? I'm gonna solve it like this.
When their father was killed, Charlie hardened, protecting Eddie through high school, carrying scars from a world most of Hollywood never knew he came from.
I think what I really think affected me the most was, you know, when I was 10 years old, my father.
Right.
Okay, and I didn't realize it, but I guess it had an effect on me. I became, you know, angry or whatever. Yeah, you know.
And when the mask slipped, the world found out Charlie Murphy was dangerous and always had been. Let's talk about it. The hidden side of a legend. Most people first came to know Charlie Murphy through laughter. They saw him on Chappelle's show, telling stories that became instant classics. For a lot of fans, he was Eddie Murphy's older brother, the guy with that unforgettable voice and those sharp punchlines. Some saw him as the man who gave us the famous Rick James and Prince skits, moments that stamped him into comedy history. And of course, for those who really paid attention, Charlie was more than just a funny brother. He was a writer, an actor, and an artist who built his own lane in Hollywood.
When he passed away, nobody said Eddie Murphy's brother died.
Right.
Everybody was like, Charlie Murphy passed away. So he had his true identity, and that was Charlie Murphy.
That's facts.
But here's the thing. For every laugh that Charlie Murphy gave the world, there was another side of him that most people never really saw. A side shaped by violence, by loss, and by the hard streets of Brooklyn and Long Island in the 1970s. Long before he was making people laugh, Charlie had a reputation that wasn't built in comedy clubs. It was built in back alleys, in tough neighborhoods, in holding cells, and in the company of men who weren't afraid to fight for respect. Charlie himself once admitted that his humor came from anger. Not the kind of anger you can just brush off, but something rooted in a childhood that was brutally unfair. He was born Charles Quinton Murphy in 1959 in Brooklyn's Bushwick neighborhood, and his family didn't have it easy. His parents split when he was just 5 years old. Then, when he was only 10, his father, Charles Edward Murphy, a transit police officer with dreams of being a stand-up comic, Charlie later said he didn't even process it right. He didn't cry enough. He just bottled up the pain and kept moving. Because what else could a 10-year-old boy do? That kind of loss at that kind of age doesn't just disappear. It hardens you.
I think what I really think affected me the most was, you know, when I was 10 years old, my father.
Right.
Okay, and I didn't realize it, but I guess it had an effect on me. I became, you know, angry or whatever. Yeah, you know.
And that wasn't the end of it. Not long after, his mother Lillian fell sick with tuberculosis and had to be hospitalized. Charlie and Eddie were sent to foster care, where Charlie would end up dealing from their foster mother.
I had no clue. all that happened at all. This is all news to me. That's why I like watching these videos, man, because yeah, he really did have a tough exterior. Extremely tough.
A child already grieving the death of his father, separated from his mother, is now left to defend himself and his little brother in a stranger's home. These weren't the experiences that make for a smooth childhood. They were the kind of experiences that forge a fighter, a protector. That's what Charlie became, the protector. When Eddie was just still a kid, Charlie was the one making sure nobody put hands on him. At school, if anybody wanted trouble with Eddie, they had to get through Charlie first.
I'm very protective of both of my younger brothers.
Right. So if I said something bad, you would jump on my...
That responsibility, mixed with the pain he was carrying inside, shaped who he was becoming. And when the family moved to Roosevelt, Long Island after his father's death, Charlie found himself in another tough spot. The neighborhood looked nice on the outside, picket fences, lawns, the kind of place people might think was safe, but Charlie would later say it was all a facade. Roosevelt was rough, especially for kids who weren't born there. Behind the nice houses, Roosevelt in the 1970s was violent, unpredictable, and rougher than people wanted to believe. Charlie's experience with the streets. For Charlie, already carrying the loss of his father and the scars of foster care, it was another battlefield. Kids from Brooklyn or the Bronx who got pushed into Roosevelt weren't welcomed with open arms. They were tested. If you weren't ready to fight, you were going to get hurt.
We moved to Roosevelt, and then, I was an outcast in Roosevelt because I was from Brooklyn.
Right.
Charlie wasn't the kind of person to shrink. He found his way by linking up with other outsiders, kids just like him who had been relocated to Long Island. Together, they formed a crew. They called themselves the King Python Gang.
I banded together because that year, for some reason, there was a lot of people, like a mass migration of people from the city moving out to the island.
Right.
So we all became a crew.
That name was survival. Being in the King Pythons meant you weren't walking alone. You had backup, you had protection. Charlie earned his place quickly. He wasn't just another member, he became Little Boss. That nickname meant he had leadership, that people respected him enough to follow his word. He wasn't the biggest or the loudest, but he carried himself with confidence. And in neighborhoods like Roosevelt, respect was everything.
And you could tell when he was growing up, he was the guy that always had the center of attention.
Yeah.
You could just tell that.
Yeah, you could tell. He knows how to hold a story.
Being in the King Pythons, he had to prove it every single day. That meant fights after school, standing your ground on the block, and sometimes stepping into situations that could turn deadly. Roosevelt had a lot of crews, and those crews clashed. If someone disrespected you, if someone tested your gang, you had to answer back.
See, that stuff is, man, gangs are just so dumb and so stupid, man. Like, you got all these separate gangs instead of people just coming together and trying to create something huge and positive. But it's like, don't come over here. Y'all can't come on this side of the block, man. That growing up and seeing all the gang violence, I remember back in the day during the Rodney King riots when they all came together. It didn't last that long, but I remember going to Looters Park over in Compton, and you had Bloods and Crips like celebrating, getting piggyback rides while they're holding their rags tied up in the air together. It didn't last, but it's just like, man, if your family, if y'all struggling and stuff, it's like, why don't y'all get together, like all the kids or the youngsters in the neighborhood who are joining gangs? Why don't y'all get together and, hell, I don't know, go wash people's cars, go do something positive versus just fighting each other, man? It's so dumb. So dumb.
Charlie learned early that backing down wasn't an option. One story Charlie told captures it best. He was in 9th grade when a classmate pressed a pistol to his forehead. The kid pulled the trigger. The gun misfired. That was the only reason Charlie walked away. Moments like that weren't rare. They were part of the reality. Living like that forces you to think differently. It makes you cautious, but it also makes you fearless. If you've already stared down death once, it changes how you move. That edge stuck with him. Years later, Eddie Murphy would say in interviews that kids at school left him alone because everyone knew who his brother was. Eddie said flat out, Charlie was in gangs. Charlie was a really tough guy. And it wasn't just street fighting. He studied martial arts, eventually earning a black belt in karate.
He knew how to fight for sure.
And he never
He knew
wanted-
martial arts, man.
he was big into it.
Friends and fellow comedians like Donnell Rawlings backed it up. They said Charlie knew how to fight for real. He wasn't just throwing hands, he was skilled. He could school UFC fighters on technique. That mix of natural toughness and trained discipline made him even more intimidating. But toughness doesn't erase consequences. Rolling with the King Pythons pulled Charlie into the kinds of decisions that left permanent marks. One of those decisions was an armed robbery. He and some of his crew held up a taxi driver at gunpoint. Charlie got caught and was sentenced to 3 years of probation. For most people, that would have been enough of a scare. For Charlie, the streets had a stronger pull.
Damn.
During his probation, he picked up more charges: larceny, loitering, other small crimes. But small crimes add up when you're already on thin ice. The judge decided he had run out of chances. Charlie was sent to Nassau County Jail to serve 10 months. He later admitted he was a knucklehead back then, someone acting impulsively without thinking about the consequences. Jail was the price. Still, even while running the streets, Charlie wasn't blind to the search for something deeper. For a time, he got involved with the 5 Percenters, also known as the Nation of Gods and Earths. He took the name Omar Allah. The 5 Percenters gave him structure, an identity, and a sense of belonging outside of the gang. But Charlie's mind was analytical. He didn't just accept lessons without questioning them. He studied, he asked questions, and eventually, he realized it wasn't the path for him. Walking away showed another side of his character. He wasn't afraid to step back from something if it didn't feel real. Through all of this, loyalty was at the core of who Charlie was. Loyalty to his brother, to his friends, to his crew. Now, jail is supposed to scare you straight, but when Charlie looked back on it later, he said the scariest part about being locked up was that it didn't scare him at all. He didn't fold, he didn't hide.
Sheesh. You know why though? I'm gonna tell you why. If Charlie Murphy was a legit, he seemed like the type that when they say, I remember Zach Randolph that played basketball, he's retired now, said to DeMarcus Cousins, where I'm from, bullies get bullied. Yeah. And it seems like Charlie Murphy wasn't the type to just try to bully people, but a protector, you know? So a lot of times in jail, there's just a lot of knuckleheads who got caught up with the wrong people, but they aren't tough at all. And a lot of them don't last in jail or prison, whatever you want to call it. A lot of them get in there and they become somebody's girlfriend, if you know what I mean. So he probably seen how, you know, it was a lot of fake dudes in there acting fake tough. That I can see him saying that, because there is a lot of dudes who are locked up, and yeah, they are with it. Then there's just some people in there who are just stupid, you know, want to look tough in front of everybody, but they get alone and yeah. So by them saying that, it's crazy to hear. What scared him is that he wasn't scared. Whew.
If anything, jail became the first place where he tested another side of himself, the comedian. He started making other inmates laugh, cracking jokes, even reciting poems about the people around him. Fellow comic Donnell Rawlings would later point out that Charlie had never touched a stage before that, but in county lockup, with nothing but time and tension, Charlie Murphy found his voice. Still, make no mistake, he wasn't joking his way through those years because life was light. That period was what gave him the edge people later felt when he walked into a room. This was a guy who had survived both the streets and jail without being broken by either. And when you've lived through that, you carry it with you everywhere you go. Dealing with violence and respect. The day Charlie got out of prison, he didn't waste any time. No hanging around, no slipping back into the same street patterns. He went straight to the Navy's recruiter's office. That was 1978, and he was only 18 years old. Charlie would later say, "That's when I became a man. In the military, the reason you take the right path is they eliminate the other choices. I needed that. They set me straight." And you can hear in those words just how much he knew he needed structure. For a kid who had grown up with gang ties, losing his father, and carrying the weight of protecting his little brother, the streets were always going to be there. The military gave him something the streets couldn't: discipline. Now, don't get it twisted, discipline didn't mean softening him up. If anything, it made him sharper. The Navy gave him routine, but it didn't take away the fire he already had inside him. It just redirected it. You put a kid like Charlie Murphy into an environment where you have to wake up on time, follow orders, handle pressure without cracking, and he thrives. 6 years in, Charlie walked out of the Navy even tougher than when he had walked in, and that says something, because he had already been tough. By the time he came back home, Eddie Murphy wasn't just Eddie Murphy anymore. He was Eddie Murphy the superstar. Saturday Night Live, stand-up tours, movies. Eddie was everywhere, and with that kind of fame comes a lot of attention. Some of it good, some of it not so good.
Yeah.
And that's where Charlie stepped in. He went to work as part of Eddie's security team. Only now, instead of breaking up fights in the schoolyard, he was standing in the middle of Hollywood, making sure nothing happened to one of the biggest stars in the world.
Years in fact, he used to be Eddie's bodyguard when Eddie was like right at the height of his stuff. But Charlie was like martial arts.
Charlie even said it himself later. I was there for the person I loved, and the people around him didn't like it, because Charlie wasn't the type to play games. If he thought something wasn't right, he said it. If he thought somebody was a threat, he treated them like one. And let's be honest, most of the people in Eddie's circle back then weren't used to that energy. They weren't used to somebody looking at them with the eyes of a man who had actually been in fights, who had done time, who had seen real
I'm telling you, having someone in your life to keep you humble, to keep all the evil away, is very, very, very important, man, because Hollywood will eat you alive. And Charlie Murphy just seemed like he didn't care about fame. Think about this. Having like most people who are rich and famous, you don't want to have like your family as a bodyguard and put them in harm's way. You know, you want them enjoying, most of the times people are going to be enjoying the fruits of your labor. Like, I remember Shaq talked about how he has family members, they work for him. He's not just giving them money, they actually work for him. But I don't know about being like in a bodyguard position, you know, because this is a person, like if somebody trying to take you out, they gonna jump right in front of you. And if they gone, that means your family member is gone, you know? So they would, you know, normally used to go to some type of agency and, you know, y'all know what I'm trying to say. But the fact that he was willing to be the bodyguard and not just be like sitting in the back collecting money, you know, because I'm pretty sure Eddie Murphy would have just been fine with just giving him money, you know? That's huge. That's huge.
Danger. And even though Charlie eventually left that security role because he knew he wasn't built to be in the background forever, he never left behind the toughness that got him there. Even in Hollywood, that street mentality didn't fade. Chris Rock once told a story about Charlie bringing a real gun to an audition, shocking people who weren't used to that level of seriousness.
Sheesh.
Neil Brennan, co-director of Chappelle's Show, told another story about Charlie grabbing a Tech-9 to deal with a problem. He was ready to settle the situation the way he'd been conditioned to back on the streets.
Well, Neil Brennan tells this story, the co-creator of the Chappelle Show. He tells this story about you, that there was an actual situation where you grabbed a Tech-9 off a dresser and you were going to deal with a situation of some sort.
Eddie had to step in, reminding him, this isn't a movie, this is real. Charlie later admitted he got emotional, angry, and almost made the worst decision of his life. Luckily, he didn't pull the trigger. But the fact that he even reached for that weapon told you everything about where he came from and how fast his instincts were when he felt disrespected or threatened. Charlie eventually put the gun down for good, and he said later he was thankful for that. But the truth is, by then, he didn't need a weapon for people to respect him. His size, his presence, his voice, and his past all carried weight. Comedians, actors, rappers, everybody in his circle knew Charlie Murphy wasn't just a funny storyteller. He was someone who had lived the kind of life they only rapped about or put into scripts. Over time, Charlie realized he had to change. He admitted that once, anger nearly led him to make a fatal mistake with a gun. After that, he made a choice to let it go, to stop carrying. It was a sign of growth, of someone who had seen the edge and decided not to fall over it. Stardom and shadows of the past. It was in 2003 when Dave Chappelle and Neil Brennan called Charlie Murphy in and said, "Get him in here," that he finally got his fame. What made Charlie different wasn't just that he was funny. Plenty of people were funny, but Charlie's stories weren't made up. They were real.
Yeah.
He wasn't acting like a tough guy for the cameras. He actually lived the life. And when he sat down for Charlie Murphy's True Hollywood Stories, it was lightning in a bottle. Take the Rick James sketch. Overnight, it became one of the most quoted comedy sketches in television history. Rick James wasn't just a punchline, it was a cultural moment. But if you listen closely, Charlie wasn't just clowning around. He was telling a real story about how Rick would step across the line habitually. These weren't studio-manufactured anecdotes. Charlie had been in those rooms, throwing real punches at a superstar who didn't know when to quit. He even said there were countless more stories too wild for television. That's what gave it weight. The Prince sketch was the same way. A random late-night basketball game with Prince and his crew sounded like pure exaggeration, but Eddie Murphy himself later confirmed every detail. Prince really did beat them while serving pancakes afterward. Even Prince co-signed it, using Dave Chappelle's parody of him on one of his own single covers. That's when you knew these stories weren't just hilarious, they were part of American pop culture. But what made those sketches hit harder than any sitcom or stand-up set at the time was Charlie's delivery. That's what made people lean in.
Yeah.
The danger was always in the room, even when the joke landed. And that aura stuck with him. Even when Hollywood doors opened after Chappelle's show, nobody forgot that Charlie wasn't just some funny dude trying to get a break. He had already lived a full life before the stage. That's why comedians, actors, and even rappers respected him differently. They didn't treat him like a background character to Eddie's fame. They knew he was his own man, and a dangerous one at that. After Chappelle's show ended in 2006, Charlie hit a crossroads. Donnell Rawlings, one of his closest friends in comedy, straight up bullied him into trying stand-up. At first, Charlie didn't even want to do it, but Rawlings knew he had something. He told him, "You so tough in every other way, but not with a microphone in your hand."
I used to bully him, but I was like, yeah, you so tough, but not with a microphone in your hand. And I bullied him so much that he finally went on stage.
That's how Charlie's second act began. It wasn't smooth, he bombed, he struggled. He even admitted that at first, it sent his career into a tailspin. But Charlie was never the type to back down from a fight. When Martin Lawrence gave him some advice, telling him to treat stand-up like another kind of battle, Charlie listened. He put in the work, he wrote, he rehearsed, he toured, and little by little, he carved his own lane. Pretty soon, he was out on the road with the I'm Rich tour, sharing the stage with young talents like Bill Burr, who was still on the come-up at the time.
Bill Burr.
Later, Charlie toured with comedy legends George Lopez, Cedric the Entertainer, D.L. Hughley, Eddie Griffin on the comedy Get Down tour. He had gone from Eddie's shadow to standing shoulder to shoulder with some of the biggest names in comedy. But through it all, that edge stayed with him. He was still a martial artist, still someone you didn't want to test. Fellow comedians told stories of being on tour with him, watching Charlie hold court with UFC fighters, explaining combat moves with total authority. Nobody doubted him because they knew everything he said was the truth. So even when the spotlight was on him, when he was making America laugh with some of the most iconic sketches ever filmed, the shadows of his past never fully left. Charlie Murphy was more than Eddie Murphy's brother. He was more than a comedian. He was a man who had walked through violence, loss, gangs, and prison, and found a way to turn that history into laughter. But if you look closely, even at the height of his comedy fame, you could still see the fire of his past in his eyes. Because once you've lived that life, it never really leaves you.
Wow, man, that was a lot of information there. Again, man, rest in peace to Charlie Murphy, because like it's like he stepped back and Eddie flourished, and it's like he wasn't looking for no handouts. He was just trying to protect his brother, but he had a lot of talent himself, man. Again, man, just hearing those stories about like the gang culture, like, don't be fooled, y'all. You know, when you grow up, a lot of people be like, man, they be like the OGs, man, they protected us and this and this. Man, a lot of them dudes ain't got your best interest in heart. They be wanting you to join gangs, and next thing you know, you doing all these errands for them, then your ass is getting pulled over, then they be like, don't be snitching, now you done went to jail, and now your whole life is messed up. Yeah. Trust me, it was right in the middle of that. But great video, man. Got a lot of backstory, things I didn't know. I know this video is like hella random because it's like Charlie Murphy, but I was like, I saw this title and I was like, what? I know he didn't mess around. Like I said, they used to say he was like the evil twin and stuff, but I didn't know it was like that. But hey, appreciate y'all coming over and watching, man. Peace out.